You've been playing the victim for too long, Lauren. It's time you faced reality. Megan and I have been building our own future while you hid behind those contracts. The transfer is already in motion. Sign it now, or we'll make sure every client knows exactly how unstable you've become. Hi, my name is Lauren Bennett. I am 33 years old. I set my wine glass down on the marble counter without a sound. The words hung between us in the quiet kitchen of our hillside villa, the city lights glittering far below through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan stood across from me, his posture relaxed, almost casual, as if he had just told me the weather forecast instead of announcing the end of everything we had built together. Megan sat at the small breakfast table behind him, her legs crossed, watching me with the same steady expression she used to give clients when she wanted them to sign quickly. I had come home early from a client meeting because Ethan said we needed to talk about the upcoming quarter. Megan had been there when I walked in, which was not unusual. She had been my best friend since college, the one person I trusted with every detail of the agency I had grown from a one-woman operation into a firm with seven-figure revenue. She handled new business development. Ethan handled the money side as our part-time CFO, or at least that was what I had believed until 30 seconds ago. Ethan slid a thin stack of papers across the counter. The top page had the agency letterhead and a signature line already marked with his name. "We're not asking for a fight," he said, his voice low and reasonable. "Megan has the relationships. I have the operational plan. You've been stretched thin for months. This is cleaner for everyone." I did not pick up the papers. I looked at Megan instead. She met my eyes without blinking. "You know this makes sense, Lauren," she said. "You've been saying for a year that you wanted to step back from the day-to-day. We're just making it official." The lie was so smooth, it almost sounded true. I had said something like that once late one night after a brutal pitch, but it had been exhaustion talking, not a plan. I had never said I wanted to hand the agency to them. I reached for the papers anyway, flipping through them slowly. The language was familiar, the kind of transfer agreement we sometimes used with clients who were selling their businesses. Only this one listed Ethan and Megan as the new majority owners of Bennett and Associates, LLC, the operating company that held our client contracts and vendor relationships. My name appeared only on a resignation line at the bottom. I set the stack down. "Where did you get the idea that I would sign this?" Ethan's mouth tightened for a fraction of a second before the calm mask returned. "Because you're smart enough to know when you've lost leverage. The accounts are already moved. The client files are duplicated. Fighting this will only drag your name through every industry newsletter by next week." Megan stood up and came to stand beside him. She placed one hand lightly on his arm. The gesture was small, but it landed like a confirmation of everything I had refused to see for months. The late nights they both worked. The private dinners I had not been invited to. The way Megan had started finishing Ethan's sentences in meetings. I felt the cold settle in my chest, the same detached clarity that had carried me through every difficult client negotiation. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask why. I simply said, "I need to review the full file before I sign anything." Ethan laughed once short and sharp. "There is no file, Lauren. This is the file. Sign it or we file for dissolution tomorrow and let the court decide. Your choice." I picked up the papers again, folded them once, and slipped them into my bag. "I'll have my answer by morning." I turned and walked out of the kitchen through the living room and into the hallway that led to the home office. I did not look back. I heard Megan say something low to Ethan, but the words did not reach me clearly. The only sound that mattered was the quiet click of the office door closing behind me. I sat at the desk and opened the secure drawer where I kept the master copies of every major agreement. The operating agreement for Bennett and Associates, LLC, was still there untouched. What Ethan and Megan did not know was that the LLC had never held the real value. 2 years earlier, after a messy client dispute that almost cost us everything I had, moved the intellectual property, the proprietary methodology, and the key vendor relationships into a separate Delaware holding company that only I controlled. Bennett and Associates LLC was the public face that signed the client contracts and paid the bills. It was also the entity that carried the small, revolving line of credit we had taken out during a slow quarter 18 months ago. I pulled up the banking portal on my laptop. The login still worked. The balance showed the usual operating cushion, plus the recent draw on the line of credit. Nothing looked out of place yet. They had moved fast, but not fast enough to touch the holding company. I opened a new document and began typing notes while the details were still fresh. Every conversation from the last 6 months that now made sense. Every time Megan had asked for access to the client database for a pitch. Every time Ethan had offered to handle the financials so I could focus on creative work. I saved the file, encrypted it, and emailed a copy to the secure folder I kept with my attorney, Marcus Hale. Then I sat back in the chair and let the silence of the villa settle around me. Outside, the hillside was dark except for the scattered lights of neighboring homes. Inside, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen down the hall. I did not feel anger yet. Anger would come later when I had time to examine it. Right now, I felt only the cold, steady focus that had built the agency in the first place. I picked up my phone and sent one message to Marcus Need to meet first thing. Ethan and Megan are trying to take the operating company. I have the papers. His reply came 30 seconds later. My office, 8 a.m. Bring everything. I set the phone down and looked at the folded transfer agreement still sitting on the desk. They thought they had moved fast. They had no idea how many layers I had built between the public company and the real assets. They also had no idea that the line of credit they were about to inherit came with quarterly reporting requirements and personal guarantees that Ethan had signed without reading the fine print. I stood up, turned off the desk lamp, and walked back toward the bedroom. The house felt larger than it had an hour earlier, as if the walls had shifted to make room for the truth that now lived inside them. I changed into pajamas, brushed my teeth, and got into bed on my usual side. Ethan had not come upstairs yet. I did not expect him to. I lay in the dark and listened to the quiet. Somewhere in the house, Megan was probably still there, or perhaps she had left. It did not matter. What mattered was that tomorrow I would hand Marcus the documents and let the legal structure I had built do what it was designed to do. I closed my eyes. Sleep did not come easily, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless. The next morning would bring whatever came next. I was ready for it. The next morning, I drove into the city with the folded transfer papers on the passenger seat beside me. Marcus Hale's office was on the 22nd floor of a glass building downtown, and he was already at his desk when I arrived at 8. He read the documents without speaking for several minutes. Then he set them down and looked at me over the top of his glasses. Your husband signed a personal guarantee on the revolving line of credit last year. Did you know that? I nodded once. He handled the financial paperwork. I signed the operating agreement when we formed the LLC, but the credit line was his project. Marcus tapped the signature page. That guarantee survives any transfer of the LLC. If they take control and the line is drawn down further, the bank can come after his personal assets. And yours, if you're still listed as a guarantor. He slid a notepad toward me. We document everything from this point. No more verbal agreements, no more access for either of them until we sort the ownership. I can send a formal notice this afternoon that any attempted transfer is disputed and that the LLC's management agreement with your holding company remains in force. My phone vibrated on the edge of his desk. Claire Thornton's name lit up the screen. Claire had run operations at the agency for 4 years. She was steady, detail-oriented, and had never once asked for a raise she hadn't earned. I answered on speaker so Marcus could hear. Claire. Lauren, I'm at the office. Megan was here at 7 this morning. She had Ethan with her. They were in the file room copying client folders onto a hard drive. When I asked what they were doing, Megan said you had asked her to prepare for a transition because you were stepping back for personal reasons. 2 clients have already called me asking if you're all right. Sophia Grant was one of them. She sounded worried. Marcus raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. I kept my voice even. Did they take anything out of the building? Not that I saw, but the shared drive shows new activity on the client list from Megan's login at 6:40 this morning. and there's a new folder in the drafts section titled Transition Plan Confidential. I didn't open it. Lock the file room and change the access codes for the shared drive right now, I said. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Do not let either of them back in without me. I ended the call and looked at Marcus. They're already moving. He nodded. Then we move faster on paper. I'll draft the notice and copy the bank. In the meantime, go to the office, secure what you can, and do not sign anything. If they push record the conversation, if it's legal in your state. One-party consent is fine here. I stood. Thank you. Lauren, he said as I reached the door. This is going to get ugly before it gets clean. They think they have the operating company. They don't know about the holding company yet. Let them keep thinking that for now. I drove to the agency without turning on the radio. The building was quiet when I arrived. Claire met me at the front desk, her face tight. They left about 20 minutes ago, she said. Megan tried to take the external hard drive with her. I told her it belonged to the company and she couldn't remove it without authorization. She said Ethan would handle it and walked out. I went straight to my office and logged into the shared drive. The new folder was there. I opened it. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a draft email to our top 10 clients announcing that Ethan Bennett and Megan Ellis would be assuming day-to-day leadership effective immediately due to my health-related step back. The second was a spreadsheet of client revenue with notes on who Megan believed she could retain and who might leave with me. The third document was not a spreadsheet or an email. It was a 2-page agreement printed on plain paper, no letterhead. The title at the top read, Private Understanding, Ethan and Megan. It was dated 6 weeks earlier. The first paragraph stated that they had agreed to pursue control of Bennett and Associates LLC together, that Megan would handle client relationships while Ethan managed the financial transfer, and that once the LLC was under their names, they would split the revenue 60-40 in Megan's favor until the business stabilized. The second paragraph mentioned the personal relationship and referenced keeping it discreet until after the transfer was complete, so Lauren would not have grounds to claim emotional distress in any divorce proceeding. I read it twice. Then I took a photograph of each page with my phone and forwarded the images to Marcus with the subject line, Found this in drafts. My desk phone rang. The caller ID showed the bank's main number, Mrs. Bennett. This is Derek Voss from Commercial Banking. I'm sorry to bother you, but we received a draw request on your revolving line of credit this morning for $180,000. It came through under your husband's credentials. The system is flagging it because it exceeds the usual monthly pattern. I need verbal confirmation from an authorized signer before we process it. I kept my voice steady. Do not process it. I am disputing any draws submitted without my direct approval. Please freeze the line until I can get you a formal authorization letter from my attorney. There was a pause. Understood. I'll note the account and send you the confirmation email. Is everything all right on your end? Everything is being handled, I said. Thank you for calling. I hung up and sat back in the chair. $180,000. That was more than the usual operating cushion. They were trying to pull the money out before I could stop them. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. We know you went to your lawyer this morning. It won't change anything. Sign the papers by 5, or we file the dissolution and send the client announcement anyway. Your choice. I did not reply. Instead, I opened the conference room recording system. We kept it on for client calls that needed transcription. The system auto-saved files for 30 days. I scrolled back to the date on the private agreement and found a file from a Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago. The timestamp showed it started at 7:12 p.m. and ran for 41 minutes. I clicked play. Ethan's voice came through, first low and amused. She still thinks the holding company is just for tax stuff. She has no idea we can move the clients once we control the LLC. Megan laughed. She trusts me too much. Always has. Once the clients see the announcement, they'll follow the relationships, not the name on the door. There was a sound of papers shuffling. Then Ethan again. The guarantee is in my name. If the line gets called, we deal with it after. By then, we'll have the revenue stream. Megan's voice dropped. And after that, We don't have to hide anymore. She can keep the house if she wants. We'll have the business. I stopped the recording. My hands were steady on the keyboard, but the cold in my chest had sharpened into something harder. I saved a copy of the file to the encrypted folder and sent the link to Marcus with one line, listen to minute 14 through 22. Then I stood and walked out to Claire's desk. Call Sophia Grant back, I said. Tell her I'm fine, and that any announcement she received was not authorized. Tell her I will call her personally this afternoon. Claire nodded. What about the rest of the clients? Only the ones who have already called? The rest stay quiet until we have the notice from Marcus ready. I went back to my office and sat down again. The bank call had been the first escalation. The recording was the second. They had left the agreement in the drafts folder because they were careless or because they believed I would never look there. Either way, it was now in my attorney's inbox. My phone rang again. This time it was Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was short. 5 o'clock, Lauren. After that, it gets public. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Marcus, and closed the laptop. The office felt smaller than it had that morning. The walls had not moved, but the space inside them had changed. I had the evidence now. They had the operating company on paper and a plan to drain the credit line. What they did not have was the holding company, the intellectual property, or the knowledge that their own recorded words had just become the lever I needed. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. Claire looked up as I passed. Should I stay late? She asked. Yes, I said. We're going to need to send a lot of emails tonight. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed. For the first time since the night before, I allowed myself one slow breath. Then the elevator reached the ground floor, and I stepped out into the afternoon light, already planning the next move. I drove back up the hill as the light began to turn gold on the hillsides. The villa looked the same as it always had, but the quiet inside it had changed. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was already there, and Megan's was parked beside it. They had come back. I walked in through the side door and found them in the kitchen. Ethan stood at the island with his arms crossed. Megan sat on one of the stools scrolling on her phone like this was any other evening. She looked up when I set my bag on the counter. You went to the office, Ethan said. It was not a question. I did. He pushed a new set of papers toward me. Updated version, same terms. Sign it, and we can avoid the rest of this. I did not touch the papers. I spoke with Derek Voss at the bank this afternoon. He confirmed the draw request you submitted. I told him to freeze the line. Megan's thumb stopped moving on her screen. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. That's temporary. Once the transfer goes through, we'll have full access again. No, I said. You won't. I took my phone from my bag, opened the recording file, and set it on the counter between us. I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the kitchen, followed by Megan's. The words about the holding company, the credit line, and keeping their relationship discreet until after the transfer played clearly in the quiet room. When it reached the part about splitting revenue, 60-40, I stopped it. Ethan stared at the phone. Megan's face had gone still, the color draining from her cheeks. Where did you get that? Ethan asked. His voice had lost the reasonable tone. It was in the conference room archive. You left the system running. Megan stood up. That was a private conversation. You can't use it. I already sent it to my attorney, I said, along with the agreement I found in the drafts folder. The one where you outlined how you would announce my health-related step back and keep the personal relationship quiet until the divorce was clean. Ethan took a step toward me. You think a recording changes anything? The LLC is still moving? The clients are already hearing from us. By tomorrow, half of them will have signed new agreements with the new entity we're forming. They won't, I said, because I sent them the notice from Marcus this afternoon. Any announcement that does not come from me directly is unauthorized. Sophia Grant already confirmed she received it and will not be moving her business. Megan's hands had started to shake. She crossed her arms to hide it. You're doing this because you can't stand that we're better at this than you are. You built it, but you couldn't scale it. We can. I looked at her. You're welcome to try. Without the client list, without the methodology, and without the credit line, you just tried to drain. My phone rang on the counter. Derek Voss's number showed on the screen. I answered on speaker. Mrs. Bennett, I wanted to update you. We've placed the account under review following your dispute. Any further draws will require dual authorization from both guarantors. We're also flagging the account for potential acceleration of the outstanding balance if the dispute is not resolved within 10 business days. Thank you, Derek, I said. I'll have my attorney send the formal letter tomorrow. I ended the call. The kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Ethan's face had gone hard. You just made this 10 times worse for yourself. When this hits the industry, you'll be the one explaining why your own husband and best friend had to step in because you were falling apart. Or I said they'll hear the recording and see the agreement and decide for themselves who was falling apart. Megan picked up her bag from the stool. We're leaving, but this isn't over. You'll hear from our lawyer by morning. You can leave, I said, both of you, and you can take whatever personal items are still here. But the house stays with me. The holding company owns it outright. There is no joint title for you to claim. Ethan stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed once short and bitter. You really did plan for everything, didn't you? Even this. I planned for the business, I said. The rest of it I learned today. They walked out without another word. I heard the front door close, then two car doors, then the sound of engines starting and fading down the drive. I stood in the kitchen until the house was quiet again. I called Marcus and told him what had happened. He said he would file the formal dispute with the state and the bank first thing in the morning and begin the separation paperwork if I wanted it. I told him I did. That night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, I woke to 3 emails. One from Sophia Grant, confirming she was staying with the agency under my leadership. One from another client asking if the rumors about Ethan and Megan starting a competing firm were true. And one from Derek Voss, attaching the bank's formal notice that the line of credit was now in default review because of the ownership dispute and the personal guarantee. By the end of the week, 3 more clients had pulled their business after hearing the industry whispers. Ethan and Megan's new entity never launched. The bank began collection proceedings on the outstanding balance of the line, and because Ethan had signed the personal guarantee, their assets became exposed. The recording and the private agreement made their way into the divorce filings. Megan's reputation in the industry took the hardest hit. Clients who had trusted her for years stopped returning her calls. I kept the agency running from the villa. Claire stayed and helped rebuild the client list with the remaining accounts. Marcus handled the legal separation. It was not clean and it was not fast. There were weeks when the legal fees felt like another weight and nights when the silence in the house reminded me exactly what I had lost. I had chosen the truth over the marriage and the friendship I thought I had. That choice cost me the version of my life I had built around both of them, but it also ended the slow drain that had been happening for months. The agency survived because the real value had never been in the operating company they tried to take. It was in the work, the relationships that stayed, and the structure I had put in place before any of this began. I still see the occasional post from Ethan or Megan online. Their new venture never materialized. The industry moved on. So did I. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between protecting what you built and keeping the peace with the people who tried to take it from you, what did that choice cost? And what did it give back?